When people experience certain events in their life, they are often changed. Their habits, their mannerisms, their personalities can all be supplanted. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Many of you out there have heard my story and know that I narrowly escaped with my life that day. However, that day wasn't the end of my story. It felt like it was only just the beginning. Ever since I encountered that creature behind that Walmart, my life has been affected. Every night after getting off of work and driving home, I'd feel like I was being watched. Stalked would be more like it. That feeling would last all throughout the night. From the moment I stepped out of my office in the evening to the minute the sun rose on the horizon was nerve-wracking. The feeling was like having someone walk next to you in public, only their head and eyes were fixed upon you. Never blinking, never turning away, and never stopping. At least, not until the sun comes up. Ever since that day, I've become somewhat of an obsessive morning person. I used to dread opening my eyes and having to drag my heavy body out of bed. I hated it with a passion, hence why I chose to work the night shift. But now, when those rays of light touch my eyelids, I feel renewed, happy, but most importantly, I felt safe. Throughout the day, my life continued on normally. I'd wake up, shower, have some coffee, drive to work, eat lunch, go back to work, and then drive home. While my job was in no means a fun place to work, it was the only time in my life where I didn't have an uneasy feeling hanging over me. It wasn't long after starting my new job that the nightmares began to occur. They started small at first, then became worse over time. The first nightmares played out like this. I'd be walking down the street, see the figure in the distance, then immediately wake up. But as time went on, my nightmares became more intense. Being in an endless Walmart, running to an exit that doesn't exist, and whenever I turn around, that thing would be mere inches away from me. Now, the only nightmares I have are me sitting alone in a pitch black room. My eyes trying to strain in the darkness. I'd blink. Then its face would be right in front of mine. Its pale eyes staring at me, like two dim clouds in the sky. Its cracked mouth oozing more of that black liquid. Then, in a flash, it would grab my face and I'd wake back up. It was quickly becoming something I could no longer stand anymore. I tried sleeping pills, dream suppressants, caffeine. Nothing seemed to be of any help. Suffering through this for months, I found I only had two options left. Either go talk to a professional or put myself out of my misery. I chose the former. The psychologist I ended up meeting was not what I expected. Most I've seen on TV are the Mr. Rogers type, all touchy-feely. This doctor was none of that. He was a large, bearded man who felt very intimidating to me. But he listened to my problems and provided some decent advice. I never realized how much help simply talking about my situation would be. It was like a weight had been lifted off of my chest. The constant nightmares or the sense of being followed home actually diminished somewhat, and I thought I might actually be onto something here. At first, I was reluctant to tell him about this creature that plagued me. I didn't want a quick trip to a padded cell, but he quickly became aware that I was hiding something, and through carefully crafted questions got me to reveal my experience that night. After a few sessions of addressing this creature and how it made me feel, the doctor came to the conclusion that I needed to confront my demons, as it were. He told me that if I go back and face my fears head on, that I'll truly see that there is nothing to be afraid of, and my subconscious will slowly begin to accept that fact, ultimately repairing itself. I wasn't convinced. But so far, this doctor hasn't led me astray, and I trusted him. So if this was the best course of action, I'd at least try it. Some of you might consider this foolish or me ignorant, but I was at the end of my rope here, seeking help in any form. And if this guy said it'll help me, then I believed him. I had to. It took me almost another month to work up the courage to go back to that Walmart. Eventually, my doctor suggested I go during the day and simply walk around. Since I felt fine during the day, I thought it was a fair idea. I took a day off from work and drove to the Walmart, and sat in the parking lot for an hour. I parked in a spot adjacent to the back area of the building. It looked as normal as any other loading area should. That particular Walmart actually backed up to a small wooded creek. The looming trees added a sense of enclosure to the whole area. Finally, I exited my car and walked around the back. The same dumpster was there, and even one of the trailers was parked in the same spot. Whether it was the same trailer from before, I couldn't say. I meandered around for a bit, carefully scanning the trees and the building itself. It was strange to me that every single night since the encounter, I had felt nothing but fear. But each and every day when the sun was out, I felt nothing but calm serenity, like a fish being caught, only to be released back into the water. After an uneventful hour, I decided it was finally time to head home. Actually, experiencing the Walmart during the day gave me an overwhelming confidence boost. As soon as I got home, I phoned my doctor and told him the results. He was happy for me and asked if I'd be willing to go back at night. I shuddered at the idea, but if I could once and for all prove to myself that it wasn't real, I'd be willing to take the chance. It ended up taking me 2 more days before I finally worked up the nerve to go through with it. I arrived earlier in the day and watched as the sun slowly set through my rearview mirror. I tried doing what my psychologist told me to do and repeat to myself that it was all in my mind, which actually made me feel a little bit better. Soon, the vehicles around me began to dwindle, and before long, only mine and a few other late-night patrons filled the parking lot. After repeating myself non-stop for another hour, I almost started to actually convince myself that I just had an episode and there was nothing out there. I got out of my car and walked around the building. There were 2 large truck trailers attached to the wall. The same dumpster resided not that far away. Everything was completely quiet, aside from the occasional echo of a cart being pushed from the other side of the building. I started scanning my surroundings, but nothing was amiss. Just as I glanced over the woods, I heard something. The snapping of a twig. Hearing this nearly made me jump out of my skin. My eyes darted along the tree line in the direction of the sound. I couldn't see anything, but that didn't stop my heart from pounding rapidly in my chest. I finally decided that this was good enough, that I was convinced it was all in my head. I sighed deeply before beginning my walk back to my car. But before I could even take my first step, I heard something behind me. It was a footstep. Slowly, I felt my body involuntarily turn towards the noise. My face drained of color as I realized I was face to face with that creature. It had somehow appeared directly behind me out of thin air. Its jaw hung loosely as if it were unhinged. A wheeze-like noise emanated from it as the black sludge poured out of its mouth. Its pale, cloudy eyes seemed to dart rapidly inside its misshapen skull, as if it were studying every inch of my face. Then, in one motion, its face began to rise. It kept its eyes locked upon mine as it straightened out its bony legs. The creature was taller than I remembered it being. I shut my eyes and repeated my mantra. It wasn't real. It wasn't happening. After a few minutes of this, my fear started to subside, and my confidence started to grow. Suddenly, I felt a large, thin hand wrap itself around my throat. In that moment, I felt my confidence shatter and my fear consume me. My eyes shot open in a panic, and I wrapped my hand around the wrist of the emaciated hand that gripped my throat. I felt my feet leave the ground as the thing lifted me by my neck. It lowered its face to mine once more, and opened its mouth. Its lower jaw extended like a snake's. Inside its gaping maw, I could see rows of slimy black, sharp teeth. I felt like it wanted to swallow me whole. I began to flail wildly in my attempt to free myself from its grasp. I managed to land a kick on the creature's torso, which in turn caused it to drop me. I felt my shoulder pop as I landed hard on it from that height. The monster bellowed as it steadied itself. By that point, I was sprinting to my car, but I wasn't as lucky this time. Its long fingers gripped at my jacket, tearing into it, causing me to faceplant. The taste of iron stung the back of my throat as I felt blood pool in my mouth. I turned over to see it grabbing onto my leg and attempting to drag me back into the woods. I kicked at its arm, but it was no use. Its grip on my leg felt like it was going to snap it. My hand then rested upon a large chunk of asphalt. Quickly grabbing it, I spun around and caught the creature in the side of the head with it. It reared back, dropping me in the process. I scrambled to my car, got in, and drove out of there, not stopping until I was safely inside my own house. It's been almost a month since that night. I've now become a recluse. Thanks to the times, I can eat, sleep, and work all from the safety of my own home. My nightmares are still an issue, but I found if I drowned myself in enough alcohol, I'd sleep soundly through the night. I contacted my doctor, thanking him for his time, and canceled all my future appointments. Because whenever I look at my torn jacket, hanging on my coat rack, I'm reminded that it wasn't all in my head after all. So if you plan on going out after dark, and you find yourself wandering behind buildings where you shouldn't be, just be careful. You might not be as lucky as I was.